1.
Hi, I'm Kiara, and I am a New York native, born and raised in New York City, speaking Japanese and English on stages here in New York and Japan as an MC and host for cultural projects. And we are here with At Sometime Somewhere for AT1 Radio. So I am a born and raised New Yorker, born and raised in Jamaica, Queens. I started getting really into Japanese pop music when I was in middle school. So by the time I graduated high school, I was like, my iPod Touch was full of Japanese pop music. So that was the kind of music I was listening to. I got really into Japanese dramas because I realized those songs were attached to those shows. So by the time I graduated, all the media I was taking in was Japanese content. And by the time I graduated, I felt like I could focus on Japanese. Decided not to go to college and started working at a Japanese restaurant in the city here because I figured I need money to go to Japan, but also learning Japanese would be super helpful as well. So I was working at this restaurant, and I think I was there for a good 2-3 years before I realized that I had never worked at an American place. So I actually moved from this Japanese soba restaurant in Manhattan and moved to a jazz club in the city called Birdland Jazz Club. They were looking specifically for a Japanese-speaking a New York-based like manager person. So I started doing that, and I realized I needed a bit more money to make my Japanese trip dreams come true. So I looked on Craigslist, and I remember the keyword I put into the search engine was just Japanese. I just wanted something Japanese related for whatever new part-time gig I did. And so most of the stuff that pop up is usually restaurant gigs, maybe a cafe gig if they're spicy. But I found this one that said, searching for a Japanese-speaking New York-based reporter. I went to a vocational school in the city. It was such a bad school that it doesn't even exist anymore, but it was called Graphic Communication Arts. And I got the chance to study for 3 years journalism. So I was just like, I could do that classic New York style of fake it till you make it. So I was like 3 years of high school journalism. What else do I need? So I started working. I just sent in my resume for this Japanese speaking reporter gig. And I show up prim and proper thinking I'm going to be like a news anchor, something super, super serious. And I get into the room and it's actually an audition, not just a sit down interview. It's a proper audition for a variety show, not a news program. If you've watched any Japanese TV, you know that variety shows can get pretty crazy. So the energy in the room was super high, and it was a pleasure to be able to match it and not have to be like, well, yes, I did go to school for journalism, and yes, quite, I may. I could just be myself. In Japanese, there's so many different levels of politeness in the language. And it's always interesting when you do entertainment interviews or auditions, because you're like, I'm about to work with you, so I have to be super polite, but I also have to be showing my personality. And I had been studying Japanese for 3 years, but in the restaurant industry, so I knew how to speak politely. And I asked these guys, should I speak super politely, or is it cool if I just be myself? And myself at the time was Osaka-ben, or Kansai dialect, because my roommate at the time was from that region. And they're known for being really funny, just really spot on when it comes to like when to place a laugh in. And so just that New York context of working at a Japanese restaurant, finding a Japanese roommate, just kind of like making it work in that little bubble. Through a Craigslist ad, I got the chance to start my TV career. Originally, the show that I was auditioning for was set to air just once on July 4th. They were doing a special about how America celebrates the 4th of July. So it was only supposed to be a one and done deal, but we got some really good content. There were a couple of other American talent on the show, and we got to do it for a second time. So we do the show twice, and at the tail end, we end up doing, it's called like a namachike, so like a live broadcast with the studio in Japan. And on the broadcast, we're in Times Square. So it's noisy. I can't see anyone. I'm looking at the camera, just doing my best. I think it was probably the third time I'd actually been doing on-camera work. So I was still very new and a little nervous. But I was listening in, and I thought the producer or the lead of the show, his name is Tokoro Joji, or George Tokoro. And he's like, Kiara, you've never been to Japan, right? And I was just like, no, never been. And this is in Japanese. This whole show was done completely in Japanese. And he's just like, well, come on down. We're waiting for you. And I was just like, oh, like legit? Like, for realsies? And so I laughed it off, and he was like, yeah, come on in. We'll be waiting here at the studio for you. And I was like, ha. And afterwards, the producer of the show pulled me aside and was just like, it seems like Joji-san was serious and he would actually like you to come to Japan. And so it's an interesting time, right? Because everyone feels like you have to be in Japan to learn Japanese. I do know that I'm very lucky to have been born and raised in New York City because it's easier to find those pockets of culture when you really want to kind of envelope yourself with whatever language you're trying to learn. But I was semi-fluent by that time, and I had been seriously studying for about 3 years. So when I got the offer to go to Japan for the first time, already speaking the language, it felt really special and cool. So when you go to Japan on your own, if you're lucky, you have friends who are there, and so you can get access to some kind of like in-depth stuff. You might get a recommendation for a really cool, low-key restaurant that you can't really find on the map, that sort of thing. But through the power of this TV station, I got the chance to go into a Buddhist temple early in the morning, help with the cleaning of the temple, meditate with the monk, learn my first 3 kanji from the monk of this Buddhist temple. I can confirm that they do whack you on the shoulder when you move in the middle of meditation. That is real. So I got the chance to do that. I got the chance to dance with one of the most famous groups at the time. They're still in the scene and doing amazing things, but they're called Momoiro Clover Zetto. So I got the chance to meet them in their studio and practice one of their choreography for this famous song that they were releasing. So dancing with superstars, praying with Buddhist monks, that's as far, those are 2 very different things. So getting the chance to do that and then all of the cool random stuff in between, it was really an awesome time. I feel like when you're in Tokyo, being a foreigner is not as obvious when you're in the city proper. So I feel like as a person of color, I was definitely still a minority of a minority, but I wasn't an alien from outer space. So I did gather attention. I rocked an afro for most of it. It's been very important to me as a person of color, specifically as a Black person, to rock my natural hair. I don't want anyone thinking that I'm trying to be other than I am. I'm not trying to be Japanese. Half of my suitcase is packed with black hair care products because I know I can't find them out there. So when it comes to like the super fluffy fro, that caught a lot of attention. There is some magic in just sitting next to someone and just casually chatting at the bar. Sometimes you just take away good vibes, and sometimes you take away a gig. There is this really tiny little Japanese bar. It's called Akihito. It's on the most random street on like 49th and 9th. You wouldn't expect it to be there. But it's this tiny, I'd say it fits 15 people comfortably. And I was sitting at this place one day, and the lady next to me, I had worked with her in the past. She is a super talented dancer, specifically like Japanese cultural dance, Nihon Buyo, that kind of stuff. And I was sitting next to her, and she was like, wait, you do emceeing, right? Like you still host? And I was just like, yeah, if I have a gig, I'll take it. And she was like, oh, cool. Like there's a lady I know, and she's working on a nonprofit organization event, and she wants to know, she asked me if I knew anyone who could host. And I was just like, oh, that I would love to hear more about her. That'd be cool. It took some time, but a couple of weeks after that bar chat, like just sitting with a person and reminding them that I exist, I got an email, a very professional email, from a lady from an organization called the Japan Performing Arts Project. And she emailed me and she asked, I've got this partially government funded project. We're looking for someone to help us explain kimono culture to a wider audience. You know, kimono is a wonderful, sustainable fashion product that a lot of people think is just one wear and done, but it is so often recycled into other forms. You know, you can make bags out of it, hats out of it. A lot of people don't know that even just the stitching of it can be undone if you get a stain on one flap of the kimono to be reversed. You know, so it really is just about being long-term and sustainable. Would you be interested in something like that? And I was just like, I get to wear a kimono? Because there's so much fear of cultural appropriation, where I'm like getting goosebumps thinking about it. Like getting permission to kimono and by a classically trained person, not just something I found at Don Quixote or like a cheap little store and was like, my little $40 kimono, yukata, which is cool. I love that too. But like, I am now government sanctioned professional kimono wear, like that's so cool. New York City has a small budget for cultural affairs. I believe it's called the New York City Cultural Affairs. There's also the Council of the Arts, or the Council on Arts, and that's also New York New York funded. So the fact that this government funded program said, Black girl from Jamaica, Queens, we would like you to help us represent or bridge the gap between, this very specific Japanese culture and the people of New York. Would you be interested? Was a big deal for me. Say since I started learning Japanese that I'm like, I want to MC. I want to host. This is a new dream realized. I don't want to just randomly float on a river and seeing who stops me and allows me to, take port there. I'm very excited to finally have a goal of my own. I want to MC more.
AT1.
At Sometimes Somewhere is produced by Audio-Technica for AT1 Radio. It is recorded at AT1 Studio at Technica House, New York. Follow AT1 Radio and Audio-Technica USA on all social media platforms. Thanks for listening.